Welcome back to another episode of the King's Pulse podcast presented by the King's Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez. Anybody watching on YouTube, a little bit of a different location while I'm in Southern California until Media Day here. But continuing this offseason preview series and going with the Detroit Pistons today. And for that, I have Ku Khahil joining me, who is host of the Locked On Piston podcast. What's going on, Ku? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Appreciate you having me on. Hope to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you joining me for sure. I always start these with, it's a very vague question, but kind of getting your perspective on what last year was like for your team. So for the Detroit Pistons, ended up finishing 14th in the East, 23-59. But take that whatever direction you want and however long you need. Can you kind of walk us through what the experience of last year was like for you?
It was a mixed bag. Obviously, they didn't win very many games at all. They ended up finishing as one of the worst teams in the NBA, but they've seemed to have found their face of the franchise in Cade Cunninghamam, and finally getting that after how long it's been since the Pistons were successful like that, going all the way back probably to like 2008, since Chauncey, Rip, Ben, Rashid, all those guys. To finally have a guy that makes you feel like that he's going to lead change. That kind of just had an overarching like vibe to it. So even when games were lost, and even when some guys didn't show up, or some of the other storylines that were going on throughout the season, losing games, etc., there was always that overarching story that you got your franchise guy. That kind of made everything a lot better. But yeah, it was a mixed bag. It was fun watching Cade a lot, seeing him grow throughout the season. The second half of the season definitely was a lot more fun after the trade deadline, because the roster started to make a little bit more sense due to some trades they made, and some rotation things that went on. So it was a lot more fun in the second half. A little bit of a mixed bag beginning of the year until January or so. But like I said, just overall having Cade Cunninghamam on the roster and knowing that you have your franchise guy now just made it all like worthwhile and made it fun at the end of the day.
For sure, definitely envious of having a Cade caliber of player on the roster that you cover. And I think even with the year that Mobley had, Scotty winning MVP, like I think most people would still look at Cade as the number one pick in that draft. Even in hindsight, he looks phenomenal moving forward as like an offensive engine. But what do you want to see going into year two as the progression in his game?
So I think the biggest thing, and it's kind of funny to talk about it now, because when Cade was drafted, and in the Pistons community, and obviously it was talked about in the draft community as well, but some of the things that people thought that maybe he would struggle with, and what people thought he would then be strong at right out the gate, it was like the complete opposite of what actually ended up happening. Coming into the season, everyone thought that he would be a really nice shooter, but may have trouble finishing around the rim because people questioned whether he had the kind of athleticism, because I think that was always kind of stupid. I feel like it was only really talked about because the guy drafted right after him was like a freak athlete. So a freak athlete compared to just a good athlete makes the good athlete look like he's not very good athlete, but Cade is a good athlete. But what ended up happening was he ended up struggling with his shooting, but actually was really good finishing around the basket. So it was like a completely different of what actually ended up happening for him. So going into his second year, I think everyone's looking forward to seeing if he can be a more consistent shooter and get that shot coming back. He was a really nice shooter in college. Throughout training camp and in the summer league, I know that's not a lot of sample size, but college, summer league, and some of the training camp, everyone thought that the shooting was what was going to show up. And then for whatever reason during the season, that was the most inconsistent part of his game. So I feel like a lot of people are in belief that shooting is going to come around, and he's going to take a big jump in that department. But yeah, I think that definitely is the big part of his game that he has to take a step forward in this year. Because we all like what we see with him getting to the basket, 6'6", 6'7", however tall he actually is. I know it like ranges from 6'8" to 6'6", depending on who you ask. But with a 7-foot wingspan, a good athlete, able to finish around the rim with both hands, all that kind of thing. If he can get his shooting together and make that more consistent, I think it's going to be incredibly hard for anybody to guard him in the NBA.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I have a lot of faith that Cade will become one of the best players in the league. I think he's just freaking phenomenal as a prospect. And then obviously the Kings have some ties to Detroit, specifically when you look at draft night, where the Kings end up taking Keegan Murray 4th. And obviously that means Jaden Ivey falls to the Pistons at 5. Can you kind of walk me through your perspective on draft night? Was it a like, thank God Ivey fell? And if Ivey was taken at 4, did you feel like Murray was going to be the guy at 5 for Detroit?
So I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm not gonna show any after the fact try to sound like I was all for Jaden Ivey. I was not for Jaden Ivey at the time. I also wasn't for Keegan Murray at the time either for the Pistons at 5. I thought what I thought was going to happen heading into the draft. I thought the Kings were going to trade that pick, move back, and get Keegan Murray around like 6, 7, or 8, wherever they were going to trade back to, and then whoever traded up to 4 was going to get Jaden Ivey. And then the Pistons would have to select between Keegan Murray, Shaedon Sharpe, Ben Mathurin, something like that. And the player that I wanted the Pistons to get was Shaedon Sharpe. I thought Shaedon Sharpe was the home run pick. He has, I think, the highest ceiling of a lot of these guys, but also probably the lowest floor. There's a lot of questions about him, and I feel like in the position the Pistons were in, they should have taken the swing for the home run prospect that I feel like has the highest ceiling out of all of them. I have questions about Keegan Murray's ceiling. I know he looked really good for you guys in Summer League. He looked really, really good. So maybe he proves that wrong. Maybe he proves the ceiling doubters wrong. I know that was a question about him heading into the draft. But that's why I wasn't as high on Keegan. And then with Jaden Ivey, I feel like Jaden Ivey was, and he's with the Pistons now, and I'm very happy that he's with the Pistons. I'm a fan of Jaden now. But heading into the draft, I thought that Jaden had some half-court issues that kind of concerned me. And I question whether he's actually going to be able to develop all of that. Now, if he does, I think he has some pretty high ceiling. I think he can be an all-star. But yeah, heading into the draft, I thought the Kings were going to trade back out of that. I wanted the Pistons to take Shaedon Sharpe. But with how it shook out, I think all of us are pretty happy on the Kings side and the Pistons side. You guys getting Keegan Murray, and then the Pistons and the Pistons fan base being happy with Jaden Ivey. He brings a type of athleticism and explosiveness the Pistons probably haven't had since I don't even know how far. I don't know who else, like maybe Blake in 18, 19, but he wasn't even that explosive then. Maybe rookie year Andre Drummond. I don't know. It goes a far way back. So we're excited for Jaden Ivey for sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. I definitely had the same ceiling concerns. I think most people did with Keegan, and I had the same expectations that the Kings were going to end up trading that pick, and obviously didn't end up happening. And seems like the front office is pretty happy with Keegan. Like you said, he had a good summer league. Take that for what you will, and maybe he will prove people wrong when it comes to that ceiling, myself included. And I hope I am wrong, but it kind of TBD at this point. And with Ivy getting picked up, I think it makes a somewhat interesting situation for Killian Hayes. I get with what he's shown so far that maybe you don't alter your draft philosophy because he's on your roster, but going into year 3 of Killian, who was a 7th overall pick not long ago, I was really high on him coming out of the draft. What have you kind of seen so far, and where is the level of hope at with him going into year 3?
So I'm really high on Killian Hayes. I really like Killian. I know that not a lot of people do think highly of Killian now. He is probably the most divisive player in the Pistons community. I really like Killian. I really think he can be something special. I still believe in that. The thing with Killian is that he's played two NBA seasons, but only has 1 season's worth of NBA games, and didn't cross that until the end of last year when he finally crossed 82 game mark. He's dealt with injuries. After his first year, he went from having the keys handed to him to be like, oh, you're going to be the point guard of the future, to, oh, now we got Cade Cunninghamam. Now we need to do something different. There's been a lot of things that changed for Killian. And obviously the injury hurt him a lot. He hasn't performed to expectations for sure. He struggles a lot offensively so far. Shooting wise, he's been very inconsistent from outside. And getting to the basket and consistently being aggressive getting to the basket has been a big question mark for him. But towards the second half of last season, there was just a stat that I just talked about on the podcast a few days ago that I believe he ranked in the 81st percentile in finishing around the basket for the last, I think it was the last 7 or 8 weeks of the season. And in that 81st percentile is Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, other guys like that in there. So he looked, the second half of last season, getting to the basket, being aggressive, he looked pretty good. And if he can carry that over, he's already so good defensively, and he's such a good playmaker and such a good passer that if he can add that slashing ability to his offense, or if he can add an outside shot to his offense, or simply being more aggressive. I think that's the biggest thing with Killian, is that it feels like he has confidence issues, because some games he'll be super aggressive, then other games he's not aggressive. I feel like as long as he's just super aggressive, I feel like there's a really good, like a really damn good player in there. Because a guy at his size, 6'5", like 6'8", 6'9" wingspan, strong guy, 220, a great defender already, a really good passer, really good playmaker. If he can add something on the offensive end, he's going to be extremely valuable. So I don't think the Pistons are completely out on him yet. He was Weaver's first selection, so I don't think they're completely out on him yet. But I definitely think this is his do or die season with the Pistons. I don't think this is his do or die season in the NBA, but with the Pistons, I think it is. I think this is his year to prove, is he going to be a part of the Pistons' future or not?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. The space creation, like step backs coming out of France, were crazy to me. And if that outside shot like goes down, like you're talking about, or improve finishing around the rim, kind of, or keeps it up from carrying over at the end of last year, kind of like you pointed out there, definitely still see the reason for optimism. Just turned 21 not long ago, right?
Yeah, he's
Month or
extremely
two.
young, man. He's extremely young, and the creation, like you were saying, that's one of the main reasons why I believed in him going into the draft. And like after they drafted, I didn't know much about him. I wasn't super high on him, but after watching him, I can see the player in him, because his biggest issue is putting the ball in the basket. But getting to that point, I think he's actually pretty good. He creates a lot of space. He has a really, like, I call it a yin yang kind of handle. He likes to yank people around. He has a really nice handle. He creates a lot of space on his moves. When he's confident, he does a lot of like what I would call and one kind of moves. There's that one highlight he has when he goes like behind the back in transition on Mason Plumlee and finishes with an and one. Every now and then you get that like flashiness with his handle when he's confident, and that's why I believe in him, because I see him create space. It's just a matter of can he take advantage of the space he creates. That's one of the main reasons why I still believe in him.
You think he's behind Ivy in the rotation this year?
I'd have to say yes, but with the trade they just made for Bojan Bogdanovic, I think anything's up in the air right now. I think if I had to take a guess right now, I think Ivy starts, but I think Killian probably closes games right now. That's my guess.
Okay. And the trade that you talked about, I got lucky with this timing. We had this plan,
Right.
and then this morning, the Pistons end up trading for Bojan Bogdanovic, and they traded away. Shoot, I don't have this in front of me. Can you remind
Kelly
me
Olynyk and
Kelly
Sabian
Olynyk
Lee.
and Saban Lee? Which does this like give you a clear answer to they are going to try win games this year? Is that kind of the big takeaway here?
No, I don't think they're going. I don't think they're trying to win games. I think they're trying to assemble a like competent team. Like they don't want to go out there and just get blasted. Like that's not what they want to do. They don't want to go out there and get blown out. They want to be competitive in games. But I don't think they're trying to win games. I don't think Bojan Bogdanovic wins you games anyway. I think they go from I think they probably go from winning 26, 27 games to maybe like 29, 30 now. Like they're like around that. I don't think he's increasing it that much. But I think what he does do, I don't think he adds a ton in the win column. I think he adds a lot in, again, them just being competitive and helping the young guys develop. This team desperately lacks spacing. Desperately. Like at one point last season, like in January, they had like a historically awful shooting team. Like not just that season, but historically awful shooting team. They desperately need spacing, some offensive scoring, and he does that for them. So I think he's going to bring that and hopefully space the floor for Cade, Ivy, and Killian, and bring some of that to where, yeah, again, I don't think it's going to win them a ton more games, but I think it's going to make them a lot more competitive, make the atmosphere which these young players are going to be playing under a lot more competent and a lot more competitive. I think that helps in development too. So I think that's what their plan is, because if you just put out a bunch of trash players around them, it's going to be hard for these guys to do anything. They're trying to get better. They're trying to learn all that stuff. It's hard to do that when you're playing with a bunch of, not good players. If you can put around guys who are okay, good players, but not good enough to win a lot of games, then I feel like you can accomplish both getting a high draft pick and development in the same season. I think that's what they're going for.
Definitely makes sense, and they hardly had to give up anything, at least from my perspective, to go and get them, and you could flip them again at the deadline.
Right.
And
I think that's probably the plan with them, to go ahead when the deadline comes around. Contenders are going to realize we need this. We need some offensive scoring at the wing. Maybe someone else who didn't think they'd be a contender or something. They're having a really good year. They need to add one more piece, etc. I think that's probably their plan right now.
So does this mean anything to Marvin Bagley from your point of view? Bagley just got that 3-year, $37.5 million extension. I kind of thought prior to this that he would be in the starting lineup, and now I question it a little bit. How do you think this affects Marvin?
So Marv, I don't think it affects, I think he's going to get the same amount of minutes nonetheless. I think I had him penciled in around probably like 27 to 30 minutes a game. I think he's still going to get that. I had him starting as well before this trade, but I don't know if he's starting now. The thing is that the Pistons roster still doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, their rotation is very much like I feel like the only locks in the rotation really are like Cade and Sadiq. Like, they're going to be starters. That's their role. Everyone else, you don't know what the hell their role is going to be. You don't know who's going to get minutes. You don't know who's going to be playing opening night. Like, all that stuff. It's very confusing, especially their big man rotation. So the thing is, if you start Bogdanovic with Sadiq and Cade, let's just say whoever at the 2 guard, Jaden, Killian, Alec Burks, whatever, they're going to need defense. And that's where Isaiah Stewart comes in. So you have to start him at the 5 because he's bringing you the defense. But if you put him at the 5, now you're without a lob threat and a rim pressure on the rim, which Cade completely changed his game and took it to another level when Marvin Bagley showed up and gave him that. Him and Marvin Bagley have insane connection, and they were great on the court together. So I feel like the Pistons are going to basically have to choose: do we want to add defense to this lineup that basically has none because Sadiq and Bojan are not good defenders? Or do you want to give Cade his lob threat in Marvin Bagley and basically punt defense and say, we're just going to go out and try to score more points than you. We're going to try to just run you out the gym, basically. So I don't know which route they're going to go. I think Bojan Bogdanovic does start. I think they'll probably start Sadiq at the 4 or Bojan, whichever one. And then it just comes down to 3 guys at the 5. It comes down to Stu, Marvin Bagley, or Jalen Duren. And I don't know who's going to be the answer there, but I do know that Marvin Bagley is very much liked in the Pistons organization, their coaching staff. He's going to get his minutes nonetheless. It's just a matter of, is he going to start or not?
Interesting. And a lot of playing him at the 5, huh?
I mean, the thing is like, you have to I think what the Pistons are going to have to try to find out this year, and what it sounds like they're trying to find out, is how to play him defensively. Like, that is like because offensively, you can play him at the 5. You can play him like in the pick and roll, have him be like the 5 offensively. But then defensively, like, do you play him at drop? Do you play him at drop at the 5? Do you just play switch across the board and have like another big guy next to him that can kind of get more physical down low with him? Like, they really need to find out, is there any kind of answer to him on the defensive end? Because that's his question mark. That's his biggest question mark. I'm sure a lot of Kings fans know that already. Yeah. So they're going to try to find that out. I think I really want to see them try him in the drop coverage at 5, because I saw him in switch last year for the Pistons and it didn't work. And I didn't see drop at all with the Pistons for anybody last year. So I saw switch happen. It didn't work. It was not working. They just shot right over him all the time. The one thing about him in switch, though, I don't know if you guys if this stood out with you guys too. He doesn't jump a lot in the switch. Like, when he switch out on guys, he doesn't really fall for any pump fakes a lot, at least in Detroit, which you think that would be good. But he also just backs off of guys way too far and gives late contests that don't really matter. So switch coverage hasn't worked. I think they should try him in the drop. I don't know if that's going to work either, but they have to try to find something. I think what they wanted to do was put him next to Stu, so Stu could take up some of the banging down low and let him roam around the perimeter defensively. But now with this, I don't know how they're going to do that.
For sure. I think that, the question with Bagley definitely came on the defensive end, and there was a lot to figure out with being efficient on offense, but having a pick and roll guy with Cade, I definitely could see how that's pretty beneficial to them. And I noticed kind of when you were going through those bigs, you didn't mention Nerlens Noel. Is he the one on the outside here?
Again, who knows? Yeah. Because after they trade for Nerlens Noel, I thought he was going to get eventually either he waived or traded or something. But then immediately after they traded for him, they said that the Pistons wanted to keep both him and Alec Burks because they thought they were good pieces for this team this year. So, but then they go and draft Jalen Duren too. So it's like, okay, is Jalen Duren, who's the youngest player in the NBA, is he going to start in the G League? That would probably make some sense. He's the youngest guy. You don't want to rush him. You can let him take his time, and then you can play Nerlens Noel. Or do you want to get Jalen Duren some minutes instantly, and now Noel doesn't play? I don't know. I feel like if you have Noel on the team, he's not at the point in his career when he's just like a 38-year-old that just would be riding the bench. He can still give some stuff. So I don't think the Pistons would do him dirty like that, to where he's just going to be riding the bench clapping. Like I don't. Weaver is a player's GM. He makes sure he does right by his players. I don't think they do that to him, but I also don't think they want to just like completely like throw to the side Jalen Duren for his whole rookie year. So I don't know. I think the most likely outcome is that they kind of do what they did last year with Bagley, where they have Duren riding the G League playing a little bit throughout the beginning of the year, and then at the deadline they move Noel and then let Duren come up, and then the roster makes more sense after the deadline, like they did last year with Bagley. That's my guess, but who knows? Again, who the hell knows what's going to happen? Dwayne Casey's going to have. I don't wish to be in his job for this one right here.
Makes sense for sure. Duren being I forget that he's the youngest guy in the league until you mentioned that, but trading up and getting him, or trading back into the draft and getting him at 13 and then taking on Kemba Walker as well. I didn't realize all the protections on the pick that they gave up until kind of preparing for this. And just to walk through for listeners, Detroit traded a future first to New York in this deal. That's top 18 protected in 2023, same protections, top 18 in 2024. Top 13 protected in 2025, top 11 protected in 2026, top 9 protected in 2027. If it doesn't convey, then it goes into 2 second rounders. Is there any aspect of like worried about having a pick locked up for that long when it comes to that deal? Or is it just like, it's a steal that you got Duren at 13, so that's fine?
So actually, I think if I'm doing this correctly, I believe that the first round pick they traded him was the 2025 Milwaukee Bucks pick that they got. And then that pick that the Knicks have, the protection ones, was one they traded to Houston, and then Houston traded to New York. So New York has both their picks basically. They have the one they trade, because they traded Jeremy Grant for 2025 first that was belonging to
Right.
Milwaukee. And then they used that to flip that for Duren, but then New York already had the Pistons first round pick from a previous trade, I think with the Rockets or something. And the original protections came in that Christian Wood trade. They traded Christian Wood for Isaiah Stewart, I believe, on draft night. However, your question maintains, because there is worry about the protections on that first round pick, and the fact that the Pistons don't really have a first round pick to trade. Now they could get like complicated with it and trade, like I think they can do like we'll trade you the 1 through 17, and if it goes 1 through 7, you guys get it. If it goes 18, blah blah. But you can't really trade it. You have to get complicated with it. So I think that's the only concern with the Pistons right now, because they have a lot of flexibility cap wise, but like with their picks, they don't have a first round pick they can just move around. You can't trade a future first round pick if you don't own it, like if it's still owed to another team. So it's going to be interesting how they do that, because Weaver has preached that he likes flexibility. He likes being able to go out and make a bunch of moves. I think a lot of people who have kept up with the Pistons know that he likes to have flexibility and likes to be able to do a lot of stuff. And I think that's what they're going to aim to do. That's my overall like takeaway from the Bojan trade, is I think they're going to use him to try to get another future first that he can then use in more trades again. Like I think that's the move there, but definitely I don't like having the Pistons first round pick out there protected that long, because it kind of like it hamstrings or like strings you. What's the word I'm looking for? It handicaps you a little bit. Handicaps you a little bit in what kind of trades you can do with your future first. So yeah, I'm not worried about losing it. I don't think the Pistons are ever going to lose. I think it most likely scenario, to be honest, I think they might even like turn into seconds. Maybe they lose it when it goes into top 11. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about having the flexibility to move around picks if you want to go. Like if like a star wants out or something, the Pistons want to go after him, it's going to kind of it caps them with what they can do.
Yeah, the Kings have a similar scenario, although not this extreme, with the Kevin Huerter deal they just did, which is top 14 protected in 2024, goes top 12 protected in 2025, top 10 protected in 2026, and then it goes into 2 seconds. So not quite as long. And thanks for clarifying that the pick and which one this was, because trying to figure out this whole process, that draft day trade was the most confusing thing to figure out at the time it happened, man.
Dude, so I'm on like the Locked On. I'm on the Locked On draft thing, doing my, the review of the Jaden Ivey Jaden Ivey pick, and then like this news hits my phone that Jalen Duren's been traded, and I knew that Jalen Duren was really liked by Troy Weaver. I was like, okay, is it the Pistons getting him? And then you had, I think it was Sham said the Pistons are getting him, and then Woj said the Hornets, or not the, was it the Hornets that, no, the Hornets trade out of it. They said the Knicks was getting him, and then they said, oh no, he's going to the Pistons. And then it was like they contradicted each other with multiple who was getting traded, what pick was going where, who was getting picked. So like
the draft kept going, so we didn't get clarity until a while later. Like I was the only one at the Kings draft, like on the media area that they had all set up for us, that was trying to figure out what the hell was going on with this deal, and I could not for the life of me.
It was incredibly stressful because everyone in the Pistons community knew that Weaver really loved Duren going into the draft. And a lot of us wanted so badly to get Duren. So when that trade was brought up and it was like, oh, he's going to the Pistons. No, actually, he's going to the Knicks. We were all just sitting back for like 30 minutes like, bro, please say he's going to the Pistons. This would be absolutely heartbreaking if we were like teased like this. But thankfully, did go to the Pistons. It definitely was pretty stressful, though, for a minute there.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, Duren does obviously end up in Detroit. Again, you mentioned youngest player in the league. I know it's not about right now when it comes to his production, but how do you feel about his ceiling in the future and kind of, yeah, I mean, how good do you feel about having Duren on this roster?
I think he could be really, really good. I've seen some people go as far as to saying they think his ceiling could be. I don't necessarily agree with this guy. I usually don't like putting these kind of ceilings on players because it's most likely impossible to get there. Like, rarely do players ever reach their absolute ceiling. But I've seen a few people say his absolute ceiling is like a Bam Adebayo type. And I don't know if he can I don't think he's going to get there. That's pretty damn like great to get to. But I definitely see like the comparisons. He's passing was not something that was incredibly hyped up, but he actually has. He has really good passing chops for a guy his size. His pressure that he puts on the rim, he's an explosive as hell athlete. Like, he is a crazy good athlete. He can jump out the gym. So he tries to dunk everything too. That, like, those two combinations are terrifying for defenses. You got a guy who can jump out the rim and he doesn't try to play like a guard. Like, he's trying to use that athleticism every time he goes up and he wants to put you on a poster. It's tough. It's scary stuff. And then also defensively, I think he can become a really damn good rim protector too, and he has some potential to be able to switch on the perimeter too. He showed in the summer league, and obviously a little bit in college, to be able to move his feet in the perimeter a little bit. He's very raw right now, very raw, but I think a lot of people are very happy about him, and a lot of people think that he's going to be the Pistons' center of the future. And I think that as well. I think he's probably going to be their center of the future, but they're going to probably take it slow with him, especially with Noel on the team still. But yeah, we all very much love Jalen Duren. I think his ceiling is incredibly high.
Yeah, it's easy to see why for sure. Where does that leave Isaiah Stewart, who is somebody that I think is very easy to like and enjoy to watch play, just the energy that he brings. And I was shocked that his game translated as well as it did. Like, after all the post-ups that he had at Washington, it was just such a question mark of like, what does this guy look like in the NBA? And I thought that he's looked really well, but where do you kind of feel like his projection is moving forward? And is he a starter in your mind long-term?
So you're talking to who the Pistons fan base has dubbed the Isaiah Stewart hater. That's who you're talking to here. So just keep that in mind.
Gotcha.
If you want to talk to someone who's a Isaiah Stewart fan in the Pistons community, try to get that side of the story. I wouldn't blame you, but So you're right that he's a very easy player to root for. It's very easy to see why fans grow attached to him and want him to be like amazing. Like, it's very easy to see that. Plays extremely hard. Every time he comes on the court, he's giving it his all. Like, absolutely cannot take that away from him. However, he's so actually, you know what? Let me give you some positives about him first. I don't want to just come on here and like brag him. He's a really good defender. He's probably one of the best centers in the NBA at switching out on the perimeter and guarding guards. There's one video, I don't know if anyone who listens to this have seen it. There's a video like 2 plays when they played against Chris Paul, and he gets switched down Chris Paul, and like one of them he forces a shot clock violation, the other one he turns Chris Paul turns the ball over. He's excellent getting out on the perimeter and switching on guys. So he absolutely has value because of that. That kind of thing at the big man position at the 5 is incredibly valuable, especially in the playoffs. So that's where his value comes from, the defensive end, doing that. And he's actually an underrated rim protector. So he has value over there. Offensively, though, it's tough. It's rough. Last year, he was one of the worst finishers in the NBA at his position. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I believe he ranked in 23rd percentile around the basket, and like somewhere in like the 17th percentile, somewhere around there on putbacks. Like he's really good offensive rebounder, but he has terrible touch around the rim right now, and he doesn't have a lot of athleticism. Can't get above the basket. Struggles finishing around the basket at all. Doesn't put pressure on the rim at all in pick and roll situations. And the one thing that people are holding on to, and it sounds like the Pistons are trying to hold on to, is the fact that he showed glimpses of being able to shoot a little bit. But that was majority his rookie season. This past season, he just refused to shoot like for the majority of the season until like the final 7 games. I believe he was attempting like 0.2 threes a game up until like the final 7 games of the season, where then he all of a sudden started taking like 4 a game. So people think that he can become a stretch big. The Pistons have said all offseason they think he can become a stretch big. We'll see if he's able to do that. Obviously, that changes a bunch of things. But I'm not going to buy that until I see it. I'm not going to like freak out over a 7-game sample size when I have like a 100-game sample size if you're just not shooting at all. So that's his biggest question mark. Do I think he can be a starter? No, because he's like struggles so much offensively at that position. I feel like I feel like at that position, like you can get away with some guys like being one-sided in other positions, in my opinion. But like at the center position, you usually like at the very least, like the guys you can see rotated in a lot, they're usually just like, okay, you can rim protect and you can catch lobs. Like you can do those 2 things. Let's plug you in. You can play. He can't do anything offensively right now. He's really good offensive rebounder, but he can't take advantage of it. He can't finish around the basket. He struggles in that. And he just refused to shoot last year. Now, again, like I said, they're going to try to change that this year. He's going to be shooting a lot more, apparently. We'll see if he does do a good job at shooting. If he does, that changes everything. But you have to wait and see that. Until then, I think he's at best a really good backup big who's really valuable in the playoffs because of his ability to switch 1 through 5. So I think that's valuable, though, at the pick he was selected. I say that, and people think I'm hating on him. I think that's really valuable at like the 16th, 17th pick to get. I think he's going to be a really good, viable player off the bench. But no, I don't think he's a starter in the NBA.
It's funny hearing you say that. They're very different players, obviously, positionally, as different as it possibly gets. But it reminds me of how I talk about Davion Mitchell. And I like Davion. It's just I have my questions. And I kind of think that he's probably a backup in the league, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that everybody is so high on Davion. And I'm like, until this 3-point shot is falling, and that last year at Baylor isn't just a clear outlier like it is right now, I just have my question marks. So, but I think that everything you laid through with Beef Stew, great nickname by the way, makes a whole lot of sense, and it'll be interesting to see how he projects moving forward. But having Jalen Duren there obviously probably helps feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to a long-term center. After that, who on this team like really interests you towards the back end? I don't know if it's like Diallo or Knox or Isaiah Livers. I've seen kind of get some excitement. Is there anybody towards that we haven't touched on that really intrigues you in this on this Pistons roster?
Isaiah Livers 100% is the answer. I think Isaiah Livers is going to be probably one of the biggest steals in his draft. I don't think he should have fell to the second round to begin with. I think his foot injury kind of ruined that for him. I think the Pistons got a steal with him, and when he returned to the lineup, he missed like the first I forget how many games, like the first 50 or something games because of that foot injury he had at Michigan. He came in and was instantly closing games. He was instantly one of the most valuable players on the court. I think what really goes a long way with him is that he had Juwan Howard as a coach, and he talked about this a lot in some interviews, is that like Juwan Howard didn't just drill into him college concepts. They like drilled in NBA concepts on defense and offense. So he came in and was probably already their best team defender instantly. Like as soon as he started playing, he was already like their best team defender on the wing easily. And what did he shoot, like 41% from deep this past season too? He has a long sample size of being an incredible shooter. So I think he's going to be one of those guys who I honestly thought he had a sneaky chance at starting this year before the Bogdanovic trade. A lot of us thought that he should be starting. He would bring a lot of spacing, an incredible team defender. And the thing about him, he's constantly talking on both ends. He knows how to play the game. He's a little bit older than everybody else, so I guess that explains why I think he's 24 right now. But he knows how to rotate offensively, knows where to go to the open spots to get his catch and shoot threes. He knows the player he is. He's not going to go out there and try to do things he can't do. And then defensively, he knows where to go on switches. He knows where to go on rotations. He knows the scram switch. I don't know to describe what a scram switch is. Like if your guard gets stuck on a big down low and he's on the opposite side, weak side, he'll rotate over, get that quick switch so he can get on the bigger guy. He's just an incredibly smart player, an incredible shooter. And again, like I said, one of their best, if not the best, team defender on the team. So I think he's going to have a really good future. I've said before, I think he's going to be one of those guys that contenders and really good teams are going to call the Pistons about and try getting off their team. And he's going to end up moving on and doing some great things. I could see him like being a guy who literally averages like 15 points a game, just off again like 8 threes up a game. Like I think that's the kind of thing he can do for a team. So I'm really high on Isaiah Livers. I think he's going to be a really nice player in the NBA simply because he's literally a prototypical 3-and-D. I know people try to say Sadiq based 3-and-D, but he doesn't have defense right now. Isaiah Livers quite literally is just 3D. That's what he's going to do, and he's going to do it both of those things pretty damn good. So I really like Isaiah Livers.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I definitely understand where the hype comes from. Like you're saying, a team that really struggled to shoot the ball too. You see where he fits there, him and Sadiq, and then after that, like I guess now you're talking about Bojan, and then you hope that Cade improves, and Alec Burks, I guess, is a shooter now that that'll be on the roster going into next year. But no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I also try in each one of these episodes to see if there's any interest in potential package to be made for either of Harrison Barnes or Rashawn Holmes, but I'm assuming with Detroit that it does not make sense.
No, actually, last year there was a little bit of talk in the Pistons community about getting Rashawn Holmes, but that like went away after obviously getting Bagley. And yeah, I don't know if the Pistons are going to be interested in either of those guys right now. I don't think the Pistons really have anything that would help you guys either. I think you guys are trying to win, like get to the playoffs too. So like, I don't know if that makes much sense right now for the Pistons or the Kings.
For sure. I figured, just wanted to make sure. Ku, I think that's all I got for you, man. You got any final thoughts from your side?
Nah, man, I appreciate you having me on, man. It was a lot of fun. Don't everyone out there, I want to encourage anyone to be taking the over on Piston wins. Don't be going crazy, getting too excited. But I definitely, everyone, make sure you be buying that Cade Cunningham's stock. He's going to be a superstar in the league. Make sure you buy that stuff up. But outside of that, man, I ain't got nothing else. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. That's a Ku Khahil at Ku Khahil, my bad. Kukhahil. I second your Cade Cunningham thoughts. I really think superstar. Like a lot of people will throw that word around for different guys. I really think that it fits with Cade. I think he's that guy. I love Mobley. I still would have taken Cade first and still would take Cade first in hindsight. So absolutely believe it. And I think Detroit's going to be a force to be reckoned with here in the future and a fun team to watch, just to kind of keep an eye on some young and up and coming talent. So that's all I got here. There's a lot of work coming out right now on the King's Herald. I just did a breakdown of KZ Okpala. There will be a Chima Moneki one coming out soon. Take a look at that site for all the great work from myself and all the other guys and gals there, and take a peek at their Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Hear from me again in the next couple of days.